Very, very warm welcome to another live Action for Happiness event. My name's Mark Williamson, and it's so great to see hundreds of you joining us from all around the world. And I'm so delighted to be joined by Dr. Nita Bhushan. Nita, it's lovely to have you with us.
Oh my goodness, it's so great to be here. Hi, everyone.
Hi, I am loving your hat. It's already making me very happy.
I think we're also matching a little bit too.
Yeah, we are matching. That was well coordinated. To anyone who's here for the first time, very warm welcome. This is a lovely, supportive, kind community of people all around the world trying to create a happier and kinder way of living together. For those of you that are regulars, great to have you back with us. As ever, we're going to have an interactive conversation with Nita. She's got so much wisdom to share. We're going to have a few interactive things to do together along the way. And then there's a chance for you all to ask Nita questions towards the end. So please do use the Q&A function. And as always, let's keep it kind and relevant and engaging in the chat and support each other too. Nita, so excited about this topic of building resilience. And actually it feels like that's a topic that's always important, but maybe particularly so at a time when many of us are feeling under various challenges, both in our personal lives and as we look out into the world. But I wondered if you could maybe give us a little bit of your own backstory, both professionally and personally. What's brought you to this topic?
Oh, wow. Yes. So I like to say and start out, and thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for this community and everything that you do and inspire in the world. Your work is so important. And I'm just so honored to be with you all today, this evening, this morning, this afternoon. I'm coming in live from Austin, Texas. And my journey started with a lot of sucky moments. And I'm known as the Queen of Grit and Resilience. And well, it's because many, many years ago, I grew up and had to grow up very fast. I'm a child of immigrants, and I was the oldest, and I grew up in Chicago. So I see some of the Chicago folks who are in the chat room today. And growing up with immigrants and immigrant parents, there's a lot, especially in the US. There's, the keeping up with the Joneses and all those things. And I know my parents wanted the best for us. And I had to grow up really fast. My mom became ill and sick with breast cancer when I was 10 years old. And so that would be the turning point for me. And the turning point for me and the idea in my mind that I said, okay, I have to take care of my family. And so I had to grow up really fast. And so between 10 and 16, then I would watch my mom in and out of hospital settings. And at 16, that is where my life would change, because then she would transition, she would pass away. And then a year later, my brother DJ, who was a year and a half younger than me, he suddenly died of an asthma attack. So within that year, I lost my mother and my brother. And then 2 years after that, I would get the grim news that my dad would have stage 4 lung cancer. And so all before I was 19, I lose my mom, my dad, and my brother to diseases that I just could not control. And so I had to be the caretaker of my youngest brother, who was 14 years old at the time. And just like any Asian offspring of immigrant parents would do, I went into medicine. I became a cosmetic dentist. And my years in my 20s were all about overachieving, overdoing, trying to fit in and trying not to be that person that was pitied. And if some of you can relate, you can put that in the chat. And I just wanted to belong. And so I wanted to belong so bad that I would also neglect my own personal and love life, which means I would get into some really rocky relationships to fuel that idea of wanting to belong and love. So much so that I would get into a very tumultuous relationship, and I would get married, and then 11 years ago, my journey would begin. And so not only did I become a cosmetic dentist, I had a beautiful practice, but I found myself on a very interesting evening, December 31st, 2011, scared of my life and looking in the mirror. And while you hear everyone, kind of celebrating New Year's Eve, and I was thinking, wow, how in the world did I get here? And this was the first time I looked at everything around me. It seemed like I had everything. It seemed like I had this perfect life, this fairy tale marriage, all of these things, the trappings of success. Yet deep inside, I was going through my own depression. I was going through my own internal darkness and sadness. And if some of you can relate, please put in the chat that I had to leave haphazardly. I made a decision to leave that relationship and that part of my life, to actually set on a journey to come back to myself and be brave and be courageous. And many times it isn't as pretty or seemingly easy when we choose to leave something. In fact, it's very difficult. And so that began my journey of resilience and grit. And in those years to come, I would unravel, I would sell my very lucrative and successful dental practice. And I would start sharing more and more in communities like these, my own story, to perhaps maybe spark hope, inspire other ways, and come up with a framework, a few of those, to help you maybe get into some of those sucky moments just a little bit less. So I've written 4 books as a result, and now I speak on resilience and grit around the world. And my latest book, That Suck Now What? How to Embrace the Joy in Chaos and Find Magic in the Mess, just released a couple of months ago. So I'm so excited to be with you here today. But I kind of want to know though, Mark.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
We're really excited to dive into the details in that book and some of your great wisdom. But just before going into that, just to say, I mean, on behalf of all of us here, thank you for sharing that. And wow, I'm so moved, but also, sorry to hear what you've been through. But you are clearly an expert we can learn from, both in terms of the thinking and work you've done, but also, I mean, your own lived experience is clearly something that has dealt with a huge amount of loss and trauma and challenge. I wondered if we could start, before coming to some of your frameworks, just to talk about resilience as a concept a little bit, because I think some of us tend to think of resilience as like being strong all the time. And in Britain, we have this idea of the stiff upper lip, kind of everything's fine, nothing to see here. But I sense that real resilience is something a little bit different to that.
Yes. And I also wanted to say too, Mark, for those of us here in the room today and probably even watching later, perhaps what are the struggles that you all are facing? Maybe it's a breakup, maybe it's a job loss, maybe it is a new season, a transition. Just the spring of rain many times can bring on some of the feels.
Now you've mentioned that, why don't we take a moment just to turn to the community, because it's always lovely to hear and share. So if you would like to answer what Nita's just asked and just share something that is a difficulty for you right now, where you might need a bit more resilience, maybe we could take a few moments just to see what comes up, put 1 or 2 words in the chat and we can see what some of those are. So I'll read a few of these out. I'm seeing grief over loss of parents, leaving husband, burnout, breakup, again, grieving, leaving a job, poor physical health, career issues, divorce, single parenting, COVID, daughter having problems, financial issues, chronic health, work, health diagnoses that are difficult, living alone, domestic abuse, moving apartment, living with ME, cancer, caregiving, addiction. Wow. I mean, I feel quite overwhelmed seeing that, and I really feel that as a community, there's a lot of suffering here.
There's a lot. And I want to honor everyone that's writing in the chat and want to come back to even your initial question of resilience. Cause I think, with your notion of that stiff upper lip, I think also when we are taught, and even some of those dark times in my life, I remember my father saying when my mom died, the first thing he said to me was, Nita, you're the oldest, you're strong. You're strong and you're resilient. And I didn't even know what that word meant, but my father, he's from India, and he had said that to me. And I remember being, a teenager and a rebellious teenager at that, at 16 going, okay, I guess I'm strong. So maybe that meant I shouldn't be sad. And maybe that meant I should put all of my feelings in the back closet so I can be strong for my dad. I can be strong for the community. I can be strong for my family, et cetera, et cetera. So that was my mantra. That was the meaning that I made in my head. And if we think and we see, some of the greatest athletes and the amazing motivational videos, and, everyone, when you think of resilience and resiliency, you think of strong, and you think, you see a video of an athlete just like going for the gold and getting that Olympic medal with, sweat pouring down their face. Well, if we look at the Latin root of resilience, the Latin root means resiliere, which means to bounce back. And if I were to have a glass, which I have my tea in my hand, if I were to drop this glass, well, you'd say, Neetha, well, it's strong, it's glass. But if I let this go, this will shatter into a million pieces. Yet if I have a ball, and I have 2 children, and it's the little, those little rubbery balls or those bouncy balls that I give to my kids, so that they can put a smile on their face when we're driving in the car. They're 2 and 4, and they feel that, and it has a grip. It has an agility towards it. It has flexibility. It has the ability to feel a little soft. And once you let it go, it bounces. Sometimes it bounces back even higher. Sometimes it doesn't bounce as high, but the point is it bounces. So it has that flexibility, that agility, that compassion, that softness. And that, along with strength, is my definition of resilience.
That's really nice. I like that softness and strength in harmony, because that is a sort of subtlety to it. Also, my mum used to teach Latin, so she'd be very proud that we'd talked about the Latin roots of the word resilience as well. Let's talk about some of your, with that lovely sort of context about what does this mean, and of course you've got huge personal experience here. I know that one of the things you talk about in the book is about the mindsets we bring to our situations and how there can be various different ways that we can think about what's going on. Do you want to say a bit about that?
Yes. And so, and I think even just coming in the chat, it's so easy for us to be in our victim mindset. And there's 3 mindsets that I typically talk about and that first mindset is that victim mindset. I even go into the first part of my book, and that suck now what, part 1 is kind of getting into that magical moment of suck. But let's be honest, when we're facing a mental health challenge, a diagnosis, a health challenge from a family member, going through a breakup, there's nothing magical about those moments. And I'm sure many of you are here because maybe you are looking towards that magic. But before I get into that magic, well, maybe some of you are sitting in that victim mindset. I know I was when I was 10 years old, learning about my mom's illness, 16, 17, 19, thinking, is this ever going to end? Am I ever going to see, a tunnel of light? And, or am I going to just have, people dying around me? I was so cynical. There was a point where I like rejected, everyone. I was a rebellious teenager. And so I think that, in the beginning, we feel so hopeless. And that is that victim mindset. We feel defeated. And those feelings are strong. They're big. And then we get into that second phase, which is a survivor mindset. We've been through something. A survivor mindset for myself was after I left my tumultuous, toxic, abusive relationship. And I had to get into an acceptance around that. But at first, it started with a victim mindset. How did I get here? Why me? Why is this happening to me? Right? And it's so human for us to think that way. And it's also human for us to sometimes even stay in that suck. Sometimes some of us stay in that suck for a really long time. And then that final piece, so we have that victim mindset, then the survivor mindset where we've been through something. And that thriving mindset is that flourishing mindset. It's that growth mindset. It's saying, okay, I know I've had a rock bottom moment. I know I've had a rough couple of years, but I know where I'm going. I know that things are looking up. Maybe it's because of this community, but there's that thriving mindset, meaning that we are going to look at some of our past flaws or past setbacks and challenges, and we are going to fuel them for the newness, for flourishing in our life.
Thank you. And I love that idea of from victim to survivor to thriver, I guess. But maybe we could just explore what some of the different things we might say to ourselves in those modes are. You've given a few examples, but I imagine as a victim, I might be thinking, it's all my fault. It's never going to change. Life is awful. Maybe when I'm in a thriving mindset, I don't think I'm saying everything's perfect now. I think I'm saying, like, it's been dark. I feel, that I can still respond constructively. What are some of the kind of reframings of the language we use that can happen on that journey?
Yeah. So as a survivor mindset, there's a chapter in my book called, the chip on our shoulder. And as a survivor, maybe it's like, shall I trust this person? I don't know, because I've been burned once before. I've survived this moment. I don't know if I can trust people yet, though. And so those are some of the things that might come up. I don't know if that's for me. You might have a sense of caution. The trust may not be there. It may take a little bit longer for you to warm up to things, to people, to situations, circumstances. And then when we get into the thriving mindset, what you might ask yourself is, well, why not me? Yeah, I was chosen for this, to go through this, so that I could probably share my story with other people, so that I could probably, if I can find a solution for why I'm not able to lose the weight, or why I'm able to talk to this certain sect of people, that maybe I'm meant to serve those people in a certain way. Maybe I can volunteer at a local church or organization, etc. So we might actually take our circumstances, take that personal responsibility in a thriving mindset and say, okay, this might be a bad season for me, but I know something else is coming up around the corner. Or, crap, that was a crappy time for me last month. I wonder what I can learn here. I wonder what's the lesson here? What can I actually learn from that? So these are some of the thought processes that go along with a thriving mindset. You might ask yourself different questions. You might actually ask and say, what can I learn from this moment? Or that trigger, that person rubbed me the wrong way yesterday. I wonder why that is. I wonder if I have to just sit with that feeling a little bit more, instead of judging that person or judging that circumstance or judging that thing. And so it's just a very different way that we can interact with ourselves and our thoughts, because one of the things, and I don't want to jump ahead here, but one of the frameworks I talk about in the book in building your bounce factor is that 4-pillar step to actually increasing your strength and resilience. And some of those, and we can get into it in just a moment, but it's actually turning into and turning on your RSA, the power of radical self-awareness. And I can get into that a little bit more, Mark.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And what I'm hearing is, it's in some ways it's not about pushing away the difficult stuff. It's about sort of finding a way of almost exploring it with a bit more curiosity and a bit more self-awareness, and then choosing how we respond. I love this idea that we talk about sometimes about being a realistic optimist, not a naive sort of Pollyanna view, but a kind of gritty and grounded sense of, this is how things are, what can I do? So let's talk about this amazing idea that you have, that we will have a kind of individual bounce factor. And I think you said there's 4 parts to it. Do you want to maybe just walk us through that a little bit?
Absolutely. So, and first I want to kind of say there can be 2 coins of people where they're at. There's some that, perhaps maybe they jump to that thriving stage so fast, and they bypass even feeling all of these types of emotions. And that was my case, where I was told when I was young, Neetha, you're strong, you're resilient. So for me, feeling the depths, feeling those tough feelings, even sitting in my own suck, I didn't even allow myself to do, because I'm like, nope, I know better. I know better because I'm strong. I know better because I want to be one of those athletes that, it doesn't look like they're ever phased with anything. And then there's the other side where something happens and it takes you out for a week. It takes you out for a month, that maybe perhaps you can't focus, and somebody said something about you, or you didn't get that job promotion, or you got laid off and you worked so hard, or the person that you fell in love with decided that, it was time to move on, and it shakes you off your feet, and it takes you a while to get back up. Because then you think, why me? Why is this consistently happening? What's my luck? What is this? And we sit in the suck for too long that it's so hard for us to take action. And we're ruminating and we're thinking, the darkest thoughts and the darkest things about ourselves, making meaning and judgment about ourselves. And so this right here, what I'm going to share is, how do we then strengthen? And there's 4 individual aspects to building our bounce factor. Remember, resilience means to bounce back. So how we can actually build our resilience to bounce back after those tough moments, after those tough setbacks and situations and challenges. Well, it starts with looking under the hood, taking a mirror, looking at yourself and saying, wow, okay, can we make peace with our upbringing? Many of us, and I see so many people from different parts of the world, different parts of our upbringing. And one of the things we can do is to have compassion for that part of ourselves. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Did you grow up with 2 parents or 1 parent? Did you grow up having siblings or not? Did you have a rough upbringing? Did you have helicopter parents? Were you allowed to speak your mind at the dinner table? I know that in some Asian cultures, including my own, it was whatever the elders said on the dinner table. So I felt that I couldn't even have a voice until I was much, much older. And that made me very timid and shy, and never really wanted to question other things because it wasn't even allowed. Were boys treated differently than girls growing up in your home, household, family? And where perhaps maybe there have been triggers or things that you grew up with that you've kind of held onto, maybe resentments that you've subconsciously held onto because of how people were treated in your family. Did you grow up with trauma? Were you a latchkey kid that you were having to, take care of yourself at home? Or did you grow up and then witness a divorce or a loss in your family members early on, where you perhaps maybe had an inbuilt of resilience because you had to go through some tough walks of life early on? And it could also be some of the things that didn't go well with our past, right? To make peace with that and to forgive ourselves for that. So that is pillar number 1. Have we looked under the hood of our upbringing at all to make meaning of some of the things that, we potentially might be holding ourselves back in? So that's the first part. The second part is looking at our current environment. Many times, and I think many of you looking at the chat said, COVID has held you back, or you going through some mental health challenges. And many times we're stuck in our similar ways. Either we've grown up with the same set of friends that we are stuck in kind of their outlook on life, and maybe things aren't really going well, or they're having a bad season. And so have you ever been with a group of friends where everyone's talking about how bad everything is, and it's just such a Debbie Downer, and you're like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And so you start feeling bad too, or you also want to start nagging on some of the bad things happening. And well, because you just want to fit in, and that's our core as humans. We just want to belong. We just want to fit in. But if we can look at our current environment and see, well, where are some of those things that are toxic or negative, either in the friends, the relationships, the people, our boss, our jobs, that are sucking us dry, that are making us think, maybe even questioning ourselves a little bit? And how can we actually activate what I like to call good stress? Are we exposing ourselves to good stress? Now, in my story, I share that, after my divorce, I had to connect the dots of what I had gone through in a whole decade of my life, that I hadn't really processed my grief. I was working so hard that I actually burnt out, and finally hitting a full rock bottom moment to actually say, oh, wow, okay, how did I play a role in this? Like, what was not all men are bad, right? And I could have made that belief, but instead I said, okay, what did I need to heal about myself? What was I really trying to gain? Well, if I look at my upbringing, I had a lot of loss, and I was just trying to recreate a family that I'd lost. And so to ask different questions, and to actually, in my current environment at that point, I said, all right, I'm going to get help. I'm going to get support. I'm going to talk to different counselors. I'm going to sign up with a therapist. I'm going to go to this meditation retreat. I said yes to all of the things. I even said yes, Mark, to improv. And I was so deathly afraid of public speaking that I said, okay, I guess I'll do improv for 3 hours on a Saturday. I have nothing else to do. And I needed to create family and new friendships because I had left everything behind. And so those things actually made me a lot more and a lot less judgmental of myself, and to actually play more. So where can you actually add and say yes to things that scare you in your current environment?
This is a really lovely point, and I think it's something we've never done before in one of these events. This concept, I think you called it good stress. So I guess what we're doing there is, by choosing to sort of go outside our comfort zone a little bit, we're almost building our resilient skills for when some of those darker times happen. So what's the question we could ask the community here? Like, is it like what's a thing you're doing that can activate your good stress? How would you describe it?
Yeah. How can we actually push ourselves in our comfort levels in inviting good stress in our life today?
So let's see some examples. I'm seeing someone saying going to the gym, taking baby steps. If you'd like to share whatever works for you, or whatever you're planning to do, going for long walks, wild swimming, being honest with myself, journaling, being a beginner, being realistic, knitting, trying a new hobby, reading books, taking a technology class, a new language, singing, having dinner by myself, not giving up, being sober, helping others, reaching out to family members, starting a business, weight training, booking a trip, running, learning new computer programs, getting a new job, telling someone what makes me nervous, trying new stuff, meeting new people, laughter yoga. I love this list, Nita. I'm
I love
really
this.
buoyed by this.
Oh, this is so great. And can I just get into the geeky science around this, as I am a psychology background, and I'm fascinated by human dynamics and behavioral dynamics. And I think, as we are inviting good stress, we know that we are actually priming our brains and our new neural pathways to form, because we're not in that same current environment. We're actually activating dopamine naturally. And that will also increase our motivation to want to do it more. So some of you said, go to the gym. Some of you said, call a friend. Some of you said, being honest with yourself. These are all things that, if we're not honest with ourselves, if we're not really asking ourselves, how am I really feeling about this? Do I really want to go to that party? Do I really want to say yes to that friend who's been letting me down quite a bit? Can I actually be vulnerable and share what's really on my mind without thinking that I'm going to be judged? So these are all ways that can actually prime ourselves to get out of our comfort level and invite good stress, because we're actually increasing our levels of our bounce factor. And so that's pillar number 2, is how are we actually activating what's already in our current environment to invite that good stress? And some of you said cold showers, which I love. Some of it could actually even be having a difficult conversation with somebody that you love. I've shared this, countless of times, but many times strengthening our ability to have those difficult conversations can actually make us feel more at peace and more at ease, and actually can strengthen some of our connections with the closest people to us. So that's pillar number 2. And pillar number 3 is feeling to heal our emotional capacity. And our emotional capacity is that third pillar. And what do I mean by that? Well, it is what it is. It's actually allowing yourselves to feel both the good and the bad, both the stressful emotions, and allowing yourself to not be okay, to actually admit and maybe even say out loud. There is a section in my book, in the second section, when we talk about our bounce factor, to actually embrace the sucky time. And I give you a 90-second exercise on how to embrace that sucky moment. And maybe it is screaming into a pillow. How many of you have ever tried that, screaming into a pillow? I know many parents or maybe moms have probably done this, subconsciously, getting a pillow when your kids are, just frustrating you. This is something that when we're allowing ourselves to fully express, right, it can actually activate our nervous system to rest and digest, to release stressful hormones. Did you know that when you actually release tears and cry, we're actually having more connection with ourselves? We're releasing oxytocin, and we're also releasing cortisol when we're actually crying. And so for some of us who think, oh my gosh, if I actually allow tears, if anybody sees me cry, I feel like I'm never going to get out of that. Well, many times all we need is a couple of minutes, and we feel that full release and relaxation response, because it's our body's way of saying, hey, you just needed a hug, and you're giving yourself that hug by releasing some tears. And I want to give you all that permission the next time you're feeling low and down in yourselves to actually activate these really good hormones that allow ourselves and our bodies to regulate when we're going through a tough situation. Instead of having to have it all together and being stoic and holding all of those emotions in, allow yourself to feel and express. So that's pillar number 3.
Right, so can we just pause there? Because I think that comes back to what you said at the start about strength and softness, because it's kind of the opposite of this idea of resilience as strength, like battling through. You're sort of saying, no, stop, and actually don't push this away, feel it and recognize it, and that sort of almost allow it to release. And I remember as a young boy, man, not really being able to cry and release some of the different emotions. And it was music for me. Certain pieces of music would allow a kind of like overwhelming sort of tingle down the spine feeling of like sadness or whatever. And and as you said, like in crying, then suddenly there was that sense of like, I feel like a bit like a weight has been lifted somehow. So I'm really grateful that that's a more subtle version of the resilience we hear about in the news, isn't it? I think.
Yes. And I would just love, I mean, I love this topic, and I love this so much because I think there is a different side of resiliency. And that's kind of what my mission is to allow people to step into that. It doesn't have to be so strong all the time that we can, and it's one of the reasons why we are in a mental health epidemic right now, where we're not allowed to really feel those feelings vulnerably or even talk about them in a safe space. And I think, Mark, what you've created is this action for happiness. We can be happy, but we can also share what's really going on and to be honest and vulnerable with ourselves, to allow that permission. And it's almost like what you're doing in this community and what we're collectively doing as a community is being that bridge for one another to say, it's okay. And it's all right to have an emotion that maybe we are not going to judge. And that's what I'm inviting you all to do in this, in pillar 3, is when those emotions come, we don't have to judge it. We don't have to say, oh my gosh, I need to stop crying, or I shouldn't think that about myself. All right, let's think about that. Let's feel it. Where do we actually feel it in our body? There's, 6 steps to this, but I'm going to shorten it. But if you're actually feeling that feeling of sadness, anxiety, overwhelm, stress, grief, sadness, depression, just feel it, hold it. Where are you holding that sadness? Where are you holding that overwhelm? Is it knots in your stomach where you feel like you have to go to the bathroom? Or, do you feel like tension headaches? Or do you feel like you're clenching your jaw so tight because you were so enraged and angry and upset something didn't go your way? Well, when we're putting focus to that, we can notice what's coming up for our body instead of pushing it away. And so that's my first invitation. But then we get into our final pillar, and our final pillar is our radical self-awareness. This is where we start to ask those deeper questions. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I actually feeling jealous right now? Is it because I'm not allowing myself to feel happy about something? Why am I feeling angry right now? Is it because in the past I've judged myself from feeling angry and now I can't even control it? Where maybe I just need to let out a big scream. Well, let out a big scream. See how you feel. I actually talk about this where I say, let's create a rage practice in, in your home somewhere. I've created it as a family now. So anybody who has small children, or maybe you have big children. So we'll have a little punching bag or a bean bag and a few like toss pillows or throw pillows. And my kids, they're 2 and 4, but this can happen with anyone, even adults, have your own little rage room, but you can throw pillows across the floor, have blank paper where you can just, draw and color. This activates the right part of your brain as well. And it also activates, again, that rest and digest, because we're actually moving that energy instead of staying behind a computer and typing away, after not getting that promotion and you're still typing away, or you're on your phone and you're not moving that stale, stuck energy. It's just here. And so that's why you're clenching your jaw and you're clenching your head and, your stomach is all in knots. Allow yourself. So rage room. But when we get into that fourth pillar of asking yourself those deeper questions of, how am I feeling right now? How am I actually feeling about this particular situation? Do I really like the job that I'm in? I know that I keep pouring my heart into my boss, and I've had some of these conversations, but it's not really working out. I don't feel valued or appreciated. What do I need right now? Asking yourself those meaningful questions. What do I need right now? And am I at peace? What do I need to be at peace right now?
And I really liked how you gave the example of the physical manifestations of that. For me, it was back pain, actually, that woke me up to the fact I was in a job that was making me miserable and didn't feel fulfilled. But I couldn't really tune into it emotionally until my body went, listen, it's not working. And I got the chronic pain that turned out to be like a wake up, to something I wasn't asking myself. But this is really enlightening, Nita. So let's just recap. So you said step 1, kind of make peace with your past, with what's not gone well. Step 2, think about your current environment and where you're getting good stress. And we had all those lovely examples in the chat. Step 3, you really feel the feelings, the suck, as you called it. And then this idea of radical self-awareness, which I really like. And that's a pretty deep sort of combination of things there. But clearly you've put it into practice, and I'm amazed to see you so resilient and so vibrant, saying that you also have kids at age 4 and 2, because I remember being exhausted when my kids were that age. But yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So, this is, I think, only one of a number of different frameworks that you share in the book. And I know that you've, when you define resilience at the start, you talked about bouncing back, but I also know you talk about kind of moving forward. I wondered if you want to say a bit about what are we really talking about, bouncing back here, or are we talking about bouncing forward?
Yeah. So once we actually have our foundation, right? We have our pillars that keep us uprooted. We have our pillars that connect us. It's basically our foundation of our home, and our home is, our sacred sense of ourself, right? We have made peace with our upbringing or our past. We actually are saying yes and shifting our current environment and looking at our current environment and adding that good stress. And we're having that foundation of our emotional capacity, stretching ourselves to actually feel the discomfort, but also to feel the joy, and to also know that there can be 2 conflicting emotions that can exist all at the same time. Grief can exist with joy, right? We can still find some slivers of happiness through some of our dark moments, and that radical self-awareness, that peace in saying and asking ourselves the deeper layers of our questions to say, how do I really feel about this? And where am I actually holding my stress in my body? Where do I hold my anger in my body? I love that example that you made. But when we're actually bouncing forward, we're not just bouncing forward, we're flying forward. And so I have 5 steps to actually recognize, so that you don't fall into a suck pattern, so that you don't fall into a space of being stuck in a familiar pattern or situation, so that we actually can fly forward and be in that thriving mindset that we actually started with, Mark. And so the first part is, so to notice when we are actually in a fall. So the stage one is, well, something bad happens. You lost that job, another breakup, another, a friend was talking not very nicely behind your back. Okay, we have that fall. And the second stage to that is we're ignited. We're ignited. We're going to do something different. Maybe you did get that medical diagnosis. And so the second stage is you are ignited. There's a fire under your belly. You are going to do something completely different that you have done. And maybe this is going to happen, months from now or this weekend, or maybe you're going through it and this time you're doing something different. You're ignited and you are going to take the high route. You are going to get a second opinion. You are going to, sign up with that coach or a therapist, or maybe go to that trip that you had been planning for a really long time and you canceled twice, but now is the time. You are ignited. It's scary. It's a scary decision, but you're going to do it anyway. So that's the ignition. And then step 3 is that rising stage. You are rising. It's almost like you're kind of rising from the ashes, kind of like a phoenix, or you're that toddler that fell, but is stumbling and getting up again. And they have a new sense of confidence. That rising could look like saying yes to dating again. And maybe you're unsure, maybe you don't know, but that uncertainty is actually what's driving you. That uncertainty and that I'm not sure, you don't really know of your confidence, you're actually saying yes to, because more of that in your life leads to step 4, which is that magnify stage. And that magnify stage is you are now in full acceptance and you are now the student. You're saying, okay, I don't know where this is going. I don't know where this is heading. I just signed up for a coding school. I just signed up for improv. I just signed up for a stand-up comedy class. I am terrified, but I'm going to meet new people and I'm going to say yes. And so you're magnifying more and more of these opportunities. Maybe you're coming to more of these that Mark hosts. Maybe that's where you're magnifying in yourself. Yet now you could still have those reservations. In the magnify stage, it's so normal to still have feelings of despair. It's so normal to still have feelings of, well, you might be curious, but you might actually be skeptical at the same time. You might still have bouts of depression, but you are still pushing yourself to say yes to new things. That's the magnify stage. You are accepting where you are wholeheartedly. And finally, in the thriving stage, you are not just saying that, okay, I'm not going to have another fall. You are accepting what may come. And you are also setting yourself up for perhaps maybe it's weekly check-ins with a loved one, with a friend. Maybe you are proactively scheduling time for journaling. Maybe you're proactively scheduling time for your own personal tune-ups to see, okay, how am I actually doing today? And knowing that, all right, if I stumble and fall, I'm not going to fall as low as I've fallen before, because I'm going to now ask for help. I'm going to now step out of my comfort zone and be around people that support me. And I'm going to just be compassionate with where I am on my journey. So that's flying forward.
Brilliant. I'm just going to recap quickly what you talked about, that kind of journey then, the sort of flying forward, as you called it. So there's falling, the kind of, there is something going wrong. There's then igniting, a kind of change, sort of rising through that, magnifying, and then hopefully finally thriving even in the face of that adversity. So Neeta, I really want to come to some of the amazing questions that are coming from the community. So in our remaining time together, Anna, first of all, well, in fact, just to say to you folks, if you have a question, please use the Q&A function and you can vote on each other's questions. So I'm going to be looking at the ones that have got the most votes generally. But Anna says, how can you break out of an anxiety loop when you're going through hard times like grief and illness? So many of us you use that word stuck, actually, Neeta. It feels like we're sometimes stuck in a loop.
Yes. Thank you, Anna, for that question. So when we're stuck in a loop, many times we're so quick we want to suppress it. We want to suppress our feelings. We want to put it aside. We want to bypass what's actually happening. Well, when we're in that anxiety loop, all right, let's welcome it. Let's just say hello. Let's pause and say, okay, what does this actually mean? Because the anxiety loop is saying something about our fear. Anxiety is all just about where our primal brain is going in our fear, thinking that tiger is out in front of us and is going to eat us up. And or anticipating something terrible is going to happen, but it may not happen. So either we do one of two things. We play out the scenario and say, what is the worst case scenario that happens? And, for me, in my deepest, darkest days, when I was in that very tumultuous relationship, to even think, okay, the worst case scenario for me was everyone's going to find out. And this was the worst case for me. I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but everyone's going to find out that I am a fraud, that I was living a lie, that I wasn't honest with myself. Or the worst case scenario would have been that my life was in danger. And that was really the worst case scenario, that I needed to actually leave. And so many times our worst case scenarios are in our head. The thing about me thinking that everyone is going to find out that I was a fraud and lying about my situation, that was something that I was making up in my mind, right? But many times we make it worse because we haven't actually stated it out loud. We haven't articulated that out loud or in our journal. We're just ruminating in our thoughts. It's up here. It's not here. It's not actualized. And so those are one of the two ways to break out of that loop, is to embrace. So embrace what you're actually experiencing. Say hello to it. Welcome it. And the second thing is actually play out the scenario. What is that worst thing that could actually come up? And what is the other side to that? What could you actually do instead?
I love that. And you reminded me of that Mark Twain quote. He said something like, I've lived through some terrible things in my life and some of them actually happened.
That's a great quote.
Is, a lot of it's going on in our heads. Thank you. Building on that, there's a question from Abby, and it goes back to what you were talking about at the start with the mindsets about victim and survivor and thriver. Abby says, how do our core beliefs fit with these different sort of mindsets? I know I'm a survivor, but I think my core beliefs may stop me from being able to be a thriver.
Yeah, which is great, because with your core beliefs, we can always change that. Our core beliefs are usually formed from the thoughts that we think of in our mind, and we've actually now made meaning behind those thoughts. And I think where, I've shared this with you, Abby, when we started, I said that, at 16, my dad said that, okay, Neeta, you are resilient, you are strong. So I made a meaning of that. And my core belief then was, I'm strong, which means I am not going to feel any other feelings besides strength because I am resilient. Well, now having a new meaning and redefining what strength and resilience can actually mean for me in this stage and season of life, and what I'm sharing with all of you, it can also mean softness. It can also mean compassion, self-compassion, acceptance. And at any given point in time, wherever we are, knowing that the thoughts that we think, or the main thoughts that are constantly replaying in our minds, we can actually maybe reframe that. Maybe the story in our head was something else that we can actually reshare and retell now to fit who we are actually becoming. So I love that. Thank you for asking that.
This is a great question. That's a really, really helpful answer. And so personal example, I've always been a sort of people pleaser, always wanting to be loved and valued. And that took me down some unhelpful paths of doing careers I didn't like and trying to impress people I didn't really, didn't really matter in the long run. And so I've never really let go of that, truly, but I now use that underlying kind of core narrative in a much more helpful way of like, well, actually, sometimes I just need to be brave and recognize that people aren't going to love that choice, but I really believe in it. And other times, I might get a buzz from the fact that I do something that helps somebody and then I get appreciated. So I've been able to sort of reframe that core part of me, but recognizing that some of that will always be there to a certain extent. So I love the idea of reframing. Don Veens asked a really interesting question. You talked about that idea of yelling and kind of ways of releasing intense anxiety, but the question is, how can we release intense anxiety in other ways that are not anger or yelling? What other ways could we do that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, we can do more of the things that light us up. And, this could also be setting a candle, lighting a candle, sitting in silence. Some of us, when we're feeling that anxiety, we need to calm our nervous system. So one of the ways to calm our nervous system, is actually activating our vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve You can tell I'm a science geek here. And our vagus nerve runs from our brain all the way down. It's the longest running nerve that runs all the way down into our body. It connects our gut and our brain. And one of the things that we can do when we're activating our vagus nerve, it also activates our parasympathetic system, our rest and digest, which is why yelling and screaming when we're activating our throat chakra, for those of you who are yogis, we are also allowing ourselves to calm our nervous system. Other ways of calming our nervous system is to draw, to sing, to chant. It's one of the reasons why many of the older traditions in the world allow yourself to chant, have that affirmation. Music is also calming and soothing. If you play music, it's also calming and soothing. Singing is another way to calm and soothe our nervous system. And even, you all can do this right now. One of the ways is to really connect with ourselves and put our hand over our heart. When we are feeling that anxiety loop come about, one of the ways is just to say, okay, take a deep breath and take another deep breath. And to sigh with that release and take another deep breath. And last one. And to just sit. And to allow yourself to just say, I got this, you got this, I got this. And to sit and put your hand over your heart to actually give yourself that embrace. When we were young, we were coming back from a bad day at school. We had our caretakers, our elders, to actually give ourselves an embrace. But why can't we give ourselves an embrace? And that can be just putting our hand over our heart, connecting. Also releases oxytocin as well. And so these are just some of the few ways.
I'm so glad you shared that as a practical exercise. I followed you and did that then. And I just felt a real genuine softening of, I guess there's always a little bit of anxiety during any live event, but actually, even in a few seconds and a few deep breaths, we can actually have a meaningful impact on our emotional state, which I think is a really helpful reminder. Now, this is a question from Joanne, which I am fascinated by, and I know you've mentioned already your own, being a parent and having young children. Joanne just asked, how do we help children to build resilience?
Oh, yes. It's actually the same ways in our bounce factor. And we can just apply this with our children. And one of the ways, and I do this with my own children now, is when we're actually making peace with what didn't go well. Every day I ask my kids, well, what are you proud of? What do you wish that could have gone differently or better? And what do you think you can actually change tomorrow? So that's one thing that we can do. So that's in our upbringing, right? Making peace with our past and what didn't go well and celebrating our wins of what did go well. But the one thing that I think that every parent, anybody who is around children, either as a teacher or as a parent or loved one, we can actually celebrate their opportunity to build that good stress and to activate more of that good stress. And the only way to do it is for us to model it. So if we are afraid of having a difficult conversation and we're sharing that with our kids, well, what do you think? Are they going to have the same fears of having a difficult conversation or speaking up their truth or speaking out their voice or sharing how they really feel? And so, this is the exact same way. What is it that we can do to build good stress, to activate our good stress? Is it sharing one thing that scares us? Is it trying again tomorrow? My kids just had soccer practice, and my son, who's 4.5, there's a taller girl in his cohort, and he and her, they're playing football, and so they're the ones always constantly passing it back and forth. And I guess he didn't make it. He didn't make 2 rounds, and the girl scored 2 goals. And I said, we're constantly practicing, and that's okay. We're going to lose. And that's building that good stress, because how can we actually congratulate her? Because they're teaching sportsmanship, which is great for the kids that age. But he sincerely felt bad about not winning, because who doesn't want to win? But in that, to embrace, there could have been 2 ways. I could have, said, oh my gosh, you should have made that shot. Why didn't you make that shot? And made him feel bad for losing. Or to actually embrace the fact that, we're not going to win all the time. And that's actually a good thing. What can we learn about this? And congratulate her because she had a great time today, on the field. So to be able to activate and take some of these lower moments for our kids and say, all right, how can we actually activate that good stress so that they can try again tomorrow and try again the next day?
I really love that idea of life as being still a practice, even as adults. We're still just learning and growing, but also like that point about us being willing to have the difficult conversations as parents so that we're modeling it. I mean, I grew up in a household where we didn't really do sort of anger and fear and sadness. And as a result, it took me years to learn how to deal with that stuff. And I had a kind of quite difficult relationship with darker emotions because of it. I feel, as you said, that we often do our kids a disservice by protecting them, and like as a natural instinct to sort of say, it's fine, don't worry, sort of stopping them experiencing danger and loss and failure. But actually, that's robbing them of a chance almost to experience resilience. And actually having those failures and those learning experiences is a vital life skill that we're going to all have to learn at some point, aren't we?
1000%. I've given talks to some amazing, places in the U.S. and some of the comments from, the moms there who have high school kids, and even those who went off to college. There was a particular high school that I went to who they lost 3 kids that year to suicide. And in this particular school, it was very common that the moms would call for, Johnny, if Johnny was sick, Johnny won't take the exam that day. Or if, little, Timmy was going on a family trip that he wasn't going to turn in his assignment that day. And so a lot of helicopter parenting. And then by the time they got to college, when they got rejected from the first girlfriend or love, they went into a deep depression. Or when they got rejected from their professor, again, also, went into a deep depression. So allow them to experience those hardships, failures, setbacks, challenges, because these are micro moments. These micro rejections also build that resiliency. And we want them to be strong. We also want them to have that self-awareness, that radical self-awareness, to be gentle with themselves, to be compassionate with themselves as well, which is why I say it's yes and.
We're running out of time, Nita, and I just want to end on the idea of caring for others, because in this Action for Happiness community, we do so much to not only look after ourselves, but look after each other. And there's a few questions in the chat to do with a situation where we are a carer, for a sick loved one or someone. So I think it is worth just thinking about how can we resource ourselves in that caring situation, but also many of us would love to help develop more resilience in those around us that are suffering. So could you say a little bit about how to be a carer and also how to help others who might be struggling?
Yes, one of the best things that we can do is to just be present, to give our full attention. In some circles, we say hold space, but really holding space is just being 100% present to what somebody else is sharing with you. Most of the time, people don't want fixing. Yet most of the time, fixing is one of the things that we would love to do. Your best friend's sharing something that's going on. A loved one is finally opening up to you, and you're like, okay, I'm here for it. I'm gonna give them advice. Maybe the advice is just to hear them and to acknowledge them. And most people, all what we want is just to be heard, to seen, and to be understood, not to fix. And, in the coaching organizations that I run, one of the things that we teach is active listening. And active listening is to just say, thank you so much for sharing what you shared. And I know that this is such a hard time that you're going through. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. And that is the most valuable feedback somebody can actually give to somebody else that's going through something, because that'll encourage more and more. Is there anything else you want to say about this? Tell me more about how long have you been feeling this, going through this? Be genuinely curious and interested in what the other person is trying to share. That is the greatest gift that we can have. And that is what I'd love to leave you all with.
Well, you've left us with so many gifts today in this event, Nita. I'm so grateful. And tomorrow we will be sending out a link. I know some people have been asking about this in the chat, a link to the video of this conversation, also the chat file, because there's been so much wonderful stuff shared. Thank you all for sharing your hearts and support for each other in the chat, and lots of great resources and recommendations. That'll be sent out as well. But we're also going to send a link to your fantastic book, That Suck Now What, and your website and some resources. And you also have a wonderful podcast, which I would just highly recommend people check out as well. But Nita, we're so grateful for your time. Would you like to leave us with a final thought to sort of wrap this all up?
Oh, wow. Yes. I would say, let's be brave. Let's be brave to fail, to make mistakes, to do something new, to activate something in ourselves that maybe has been dormant, to wake certain aspects of ourselves. And hopefully this time with you, Mark, with the community, with the support here can give each other, the encouragement to either start something new, to not be afraid of sitting in the suck, because now we have the tools in order to fly forward, to bounce back, and to be there for, the closest people in our lives.
Beautifully said. Keep up the inspiring work. Thank you so much for your time, Nita. We're so grateful.
Thank you so much, everyone. And Mark, it's such a true joy and pleasure for you to share your gifts with the world. Thank you for all that you do and for the community. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.